So I want to first of all thanks to OVC and to all the good colleagues from the Office for Victims of Crime that are here this evening, to Mary Lou Leary, and also to my friends at the TLPI for the opportunity to share this evening with you. I am honored and humbled to be asked to speak this evening. This month, December, marks 30 years since President Reagan's Task Force on Victims of Crime report was publicly released. He established a task force on April 23, 1982, and through that action led the nation into a new era in the treatment of victims of crime. Never before had any president recognized the plight of victims of crime. The task force held a series of hearings around the country, and as I was reading the report, I had the opportunity to scan the witness list that was at the back of the report, those individuals who provided testimony of the number of hearings that were held around the country, and I noticed that not one person listed was attributed to Indian country. There were numerous crime victims that were listed as anonymous, and perhaps some of those individuals were in fact from Indian country. And there were United States attorneys and other criminal justice professionals listed, and some of them, I'm sure, certainly worked with Native American victims of crime. But no one was listed as being a tribal member, tribal leader, or working for a tribal social service or criminal justice program. This would certainly not be the case at the task force we're convening today. The statement of the task force chairman at the beginning of the report says, and I quote, "The important proposals contained here will not be clear unless you first confront the human reality of victimization. Few are willing to do so. Unless you are, however, you will not be able to understand. During our hearings, we were told by one eloquent witness, it is hard not to turn away from victims. Their pain is discomforting, their anger is sometimes embarrassing, their mutilations are upsetting. Victims are vital reminders of our own vulnerability, but one cannot turn away. You must know what it is to have your life wrenched and broken, to realize that you will never really be the same. Then you must experience what it means to survive, only to be blamed and used and ignored by those you thought were there to help you. Only when you are willing to confront all these things will you understand what victimization means." This 1982 report goes on to list recommendations for action. And as a federal prosecutor, I paid particular attention to the section containing recommendations for federal and state action. And I was quite frankly stunned when I read them, as almost all of the recommendations have been put into law, policy, or practice. In the 30 years since that task force report was issued, there has been nothing short of a revolution in this country when it comes to the area of victim rights. But as I look around the room tonight, I know that many of you remember what it was like in the 80s to be a victim of crime, to experience the frustrations of the criminal justice system as you work to assist a victim, or to stand by and support a loved one during the healing process. Many of us here have experienced events that have led us to the work that we do today. Back in the 80s, I too experienced frustration and anger at a criminal justice system that seemingly condoned shoddy police work and prosecutors willing to turn away and do nothing. I grew up in rural Michigan. In 1984, I was a junior in college. I always looked forward to the Thanksgiving break because that was the first time every fall that I went home to see my family. But my junior year was different. The day before break started, my mother called and asked if I could find a friend to stay with for the weekend because my grandfather had broken into our house and tried to kill my grandmother. Mom said the house was a crime scene with broken glass and blood all over it, and that it would be better if I didn't come home. The prosecutor in that case brought no charges. A number of years later, I became the elected prosecuting attorney in that same county. And that gave me access to all of the old files in the office. So one night, after all of the other staff left, I got to digging in those old filing cabinets and found a case involving my grandmother. That event changed my family. That event was reduced to about 2/3 of a page of a police report. No pictures were taken. Given this was a scene, at least in my mom's estimation, was so bad I shouldn't come home, but the police didn't feel the need to take any pictures. The police and prosecutor in that case wrote the whole episode off to an old man with an alcohol problem. So much has changed since that time. And why has it changed? Because of you and people like you throughout this whole country who have stood up and said enough. No more. Crime victims cannot be ignored, and they must have rights. You are the ones who have worked to make the laundry list of recommendations in the 1982 President's Task Force on Victims of Crime a reality. But you are also the same people that said, that's not good enough. We can do better, and we can do more. So I just want to briefly look at some of the big legislative changes and victories that there has been for victims in the past 15 years. In 1994, the Violence Against Women Act was passed. That landmark legislation has provided millions of dollars to tribal nations and service provider programs to assist victims of homicide, sexual assault, domestic violence, and stalking. VAWA also gave federal prosecutors new tools to hold offenders accountable. You pushed in 1994 to get the original bill passed, and then a subsequent reauthorization in 2000. You did that. In 2004, the Crime Victims' Rights Act was passed because you said victims must be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect, and that victims must have a right to speak with prosecutors about their case before any type of plea decision is made, and that victims must have a right to be made aware of all public proceedings concerning their case. You did that. And you also pushed so that the law had real teeth, so that if a prosecutor was not providing a victim her rights, the victim now has standing to bring an action in court to force provision of their rights. You did that. In 2005, you worked to get VAWA reauthorized again, this time with Title IX, Safety for Indian Women. You pushed to get a tribal deputy position, a policy position within the Office of Violence Against Women. And Lorraine Edmo has held that position since it was created. You pushed for BIA officers to have warrantless arrest authority for a domestic violence crime committed outside of their presence. And you worked to make the habitual domestic assault statute a reality, so that serial batterers now can be charged in federal court with a felony. You did that. And in 2010, there was the passage of the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act and the Tribal Law and Order Act. Each of these important bills was passed because of you and people like you who knew what was needed in Indian country to help make people safe and to provide assistance to those who had already been victimized. You did that. And now we have currently pending the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. Many in this room are fully engaged in getting this passed. There are many exciting provisions contained in Senate Bill 1925, which was passed in April of 2012. As you know, one of those provisions, tribal criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians, in cases of domestic violence or protection order violations, is fully supported by the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice and this administration has enjoyed partnering with Indian country on so many critical issues this past 4 years. We have leadership within the department fully committed to Indian country issues, starting at the top with the Attorney General Eric Holder, Assistant Attorney General Tony West, who we will have the pleasure to hear from tomorrow, South Dakota U.S. Attorney Brendan Johnson, Mary Lou Leary at OJP, Joy Frost at OVC, and Dee Hansen at OVW, to name a few. The Department of Justice in the past couple of years has added additional Assistant United States Attorneys, FBI Special Agents, and victim witness staff, all dedicated to Indian country. DOJ has instituted community prosecution pilot projects in 3 districts, and we have tribal liaisons in every United States Attorney's Office with Indian country responsibility. DOJ has also created a national Indian country training initiative that for the first time has federal and tribal prosecutors, law enforcement, advocates, and other social service and criminal justice personnel receiving training all at the same time in the same room together on topics like sexual assault, domestic violence, forensic interviewing of child victims, and strangulation and suffocation, to name a few. And best of all, tribal representatives have their travel, lodging, and food expenses paid for by the Department of Justice, because we recognize that some of our partners in Indian country have had a difficult time getting to training because of financial limitations. Many times it is national leaders who grab the headlines when change is made, but many of their ideas and their energy come from folks in the field, from the grassroots, from you, from men like Jerry Gardner, who worked so hard to put this event together, from women like Ellen Pence and Tilly Blackbear, both who have dedicated their lives working to assist battered women. And I could name a lot of the folks I still see sitting out here who have shared and taught me so much over the years. Each of our individual efforts is part of a movement. This conference, to me, always feels like a tangible, shared piece of actual movement. The progress, growth, pain, joy, wisdom, connections, forgiveness, love are palpable and they are real. I was reading a book earlier this week and it talked about the butterfly effect, the phenomenon where a minor change in circumstances can cause a large change in outcome. And the term butterfly effect is derived from the theoretical example of a hurricane's formation being contingent on whether or not a distant butterfly had flapped its wings several weeks before. I thought about that concept in the context of this event and also the work that we do. Creator gave us the butterfly. While the butterfly is seen as gentle and extremely fragile, it has the strength to do great things. Butterflies are responsible for pollination and therefore give us the beautiful flowers, and they have the strength and the ability to migrate great distances. Crime victims and you, the building blocks of this movement, are like the butterfly. You possess the ability to affect great change and the strength from within to fight the fight, no matter how long the battle, to see that justice is done and that laws are written that ensure justice for Native victims of crime. So much has been accomplished the past 30 years, so I hope that you have the opportunity during the time that you are here to enjoy the victories. I truly believe that today my grandmother and others similarly situated would see justice. Maybe another 30 years from now, someone will be standing on a similar podium, reading from a report about what was accomplished by you, our contemporary group of butterflies. When you move your wings, you may not cause a hurricane, but I bet whoever reviews your efforts 3 decades from now will say, without a doubt, wow, they really did it. We who have worked in Indian country have been forever changed by the victims we have met, by the experiences they have shared, by the wisdoms from suffering that they have imparted. I want to thank you tonight for what you have taught me, a prosecutor who has been forever changed. Thank you.